From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. In 2022, Democrat Andrea Campbell made history when she was elected Massachusetts Attorney General, becoming the first black woman to hold a constitutional office in the Bay State. Late last year, Campbell stood out again, this time when she announced that her family was moving from Boston to Dartmouth, making her the first Massachusetts statewide official in modern history to live in Bristol County. Ahead of her re-election campaign launch this week, the AG sat down one-on-one with our own Ted Nesi to discuss her record and what was behind her move to our area.
AG Campbell, thanks for taking a few minutes to sit down with me today. I have to start with this. You are now a local.
Yes, I am.
You live in our region. You and your family moved to Dartmouth, I think, this year, right? Or
end of last year.
End of last year, okay.
End of last year.
Why Dartmouth?
One, we love the community. I love the South Coast. We have an office in New Bedford that I've fallen in love with, and also friends and family that are close by, not just in the South Coast, but also on the Cape. And we're excited to find a home that aligns with everything we needed for our two boys, a school system that's been great, so it's been amazing.
Bristol County is much more purple than other parts of Massachusetts. You obviously have been on the city council in Boston, deep blue in Boston. What's it been like to shift from living in a very deep blue jurisdiction like up there to a more purple place like down here?
I love it, and frankly, I don't look at parts of the state as blue, red, or purple. I look at it as a community. It's people. And so if anything, I love the church that we attend. I love the schools. I've gotten to know the police chief and law enforcement. Folks are working hard in this community. If anything, I see the South Coast region as an area that feels left out and left behind. And so for me, it's continuing to prioritize this area, do the work in my office that delivers for people in this community, regardless of what letters by their name, whether it's a D, R, or I, and making sure they feel valued. And if anything, I welcome perspectives that are different. Folks who maybe voted for the president, who have a different perspective, I listen to. They have areas where we align and areas where we maybe don't. And so for me, it's about seeing the humanity in folks and making sure that we're delivering for them.
Well, to your point about the South Coast feeling left behind, I'm from southeastern Mass. I know people have always had that chip on their shoulder. I don't know if there's any precedent for a state constitutional officer living in Bristol County, certainly not in modern history. I'm not sure even if I go back to like colonial times if that's happened. Do you think it makes a difference where the people running the state are, laying their heads at night?
I didn't think so, but then I started talking to people, and I didn't realize how much that meant to them, that I would move my family out of the city of Boston to this incredible county, to this region of the state, and frankly to prioritize all that is happening here, lift it up, and make sure that it's celebrated. I love this community. I love this region. There are so many assets because of the people who live here, the organizations, and if anything, people are hardworking, and they want to deliver not only for their families, but for their community. My boys also participate in Taekwondo and sports, and you can see that community and connection and the values for family, the values for, in many parts of the South Coast, for God, for Jesus even, which align with me and my values and so much more. So I love it. It's an honor and privilege to be here. And it makes me feel good that people would celebrate it. It's not what, of course, was a catalyst, but it warms my heart.
So last question about the region. The second you said you were moving down here, the speculation began that you had your eye on the congressional seat currently held by Congressman Bill Keating. Do you have any interest in down the road running for that seat?
First of all, I have a great relationship with Congressman Keating, and I want him to keep his job. We are certainly working in collaboration, especially with everything having to do with protecting the resources coming to this region, particularly for infrastructure projects where the federal administration may try to take away those jobs. But I love my job, and I plan on seeking re-election to keep it. It's an honor and privilege to be the Attorney General, and I wouldn't want any other job.
Do you leave the door open someday?
I love my job. I'm focused on being AG, and if anything, folks would often remark, folks who had this job, it's the best job in politics, and I don't think that has changed.
Well, let's talk about that job because you're kicking off your bid for re-election this week. Often, I've covered a lot of re-election races in both states. Elected officials have a laundry list of things they want to remind the voters they've been working on. But voters can only keep track of so much. If there was one thing from your tenure so far you wanted the average voter, whether in southeastern Mass or anywhere else in the state, to be thinking about as they decide next year, what would it be?
Economics and affordability. We have been really intentional of prioritizing putting money back into the pockets of our residents. It is not lost on me that residents are living paycheck to paycheck. Affordability is still the #1 issue that folks are grappling with. And they're concerned about whether or not their children will do better than the last generation. So we put millions of dollars back into the pockets of workers, millions of dollars back into the pockets of consumers, our elders who are often prone to scams and fraud, and so much more. And at the same time, we're running a parallel track, and I have to say this because it's equally important. We're holding the federal administration accountable because much of what they're doing is seeking to take away not only the millions we want to put into the pockets of workers, but they're not prioritizing consumer protection. They're not prioritizing affordability, and they're certainly not prioritizing workers. And so this issue of affordability actually is becoming even more important for us to do more on because the federal administration has simply walked away.
Let's talk about the litigation against the Trump administration. I interviewed last week Nate Raymond from Reuters, who covers all this litigation very closely. He had a really interesting piece. He found that you and your fellow Democratic AGs are winning almost all the cases you bring in the First Circuit. But the Supreme Court is generally siding with Trump. I know not every case by any means has gotten there yet. But is this just a case where Democratic AGs like you and Peter Nerona can convince Democratic appointed judges here to block the president, but then there's not an argument you folks have to convince Republican appointed Supreme Court justices to see the law the same way?
I would actually take a step back. While I've been disappointed by some of the decisions out of the Supreme Court, I would just add, actually, many of those decisions I think at times are politicized, which is unfortunate. You don't want any court in this judicial system to be politicized. You want them to look at the facts, to also look at precedent, and to make sure that they're aligning with that. That being said, we are close to 40 lawsuits and holding this federal administration accountable. It's significant work. We're protecting billions of dollars. Actually, we were just running the numbers ourselves. The federal administration has attempted to take away close to $3.18 billion from Massachusetts. Our close to 40 lawsuits have protected $3.01 billion of those resources. What is that? That's infrastructure. Those are transportation projects, climate resilience projects. Those are jobs. Those are cases that protect funding for NIH, including clinical trials like pediatric cancer or PTSD or Alzheimer's. These are millions to protect our public schools. Frankly, the school year would have started off very differently had we not won that lawsuit to protect those millions of dollars for our public schools. So we're picking and choosing our battles. It's not personal. It really is about protecting our economy, our jobs, and our monies, and frankly, our people.
Do you think this is then partly a product of what the administration is choosing to quickly elevate to the Supreme Court as part of why we're seeing it, and they're not necessarily, when they think you all might do better at the higher court, they're not necessarily appealing?
I think they're attempting to be strategic here. And what I have seen most often is they're actually not challenging us and saying that what they're doing is unlawful. Instead, they're saying we're in the wrong court or we're seeking a relief at the wrong time. It's all procedural, and I don't want to get into all the weeds because most people don't care about that. But they have yet to really say that what they're doing is unlawful. And that's what people should be concerned about. If we don't have a constitution, if we don't have the rule of law, your government owes you absolutely nothing. The Constitution promises you some things, including, frankly, having a functioning economy. Or if you're assaulted on the street, that someone's held accountable to that. If you undermine this very system that we take for granted, we no longer look like the United States of America. We no longer look like a democratic society. And most importantly, government cannot give our people what it says it promises them. So I'm concerned about all of that and encouraging folks to become more informed because they too should be concerned, even if they support certain positions of this president. They should be concerned about the egregious and unlawful and blatant legal violations of this administration, which is in stark contrast to any president I think we've ever seen in the history of this country.
Coming up, a high-profile battle Attorney General Campbell has had with a fellow Democrat. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. We continue Ted Nesi's interview now with Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell.
We've just seen one of your fellow AGs, Tish James in New York, indicted by a grand jury, something Trump actively pushed for, the president. One thing I hear from Republican viewers is that you could sort of say turnabout is fair play. They point back to Tish James's campaign, where she campaigned on prosecuting the president. Do you think, in retrospect, that set the wrong tone for the role that the attorney generals were going to play, and maybe made people wonder about some of these rule of law questions if it's dependent on who's on which side of it?
I'm proud to work with my AGs all across the country, both Democrats and Republicans, including AG James. We've done significant work together to protect the rights of residents, to put money back into consumers' pockets. We've done that in collaboration across state lines, which is important and significant. I want to take a step back, because what we saw from the Department of Justice is an attorney, an experienced prosecutor, who said there is not enough evidence to indict AG James, and was pressured to bring about an indictment for revenge and retribution. And that prosecutor said, no, I'm not doing that, and was forced out of the DOJ. They then hire someone who has no legal experience really in prosecuting cases to frankly seek out this retribution and this revenge against AG James. And so I'm asking folks to frankly take a step back, because put themselves in the shoes of an AG James. If you disagree with President Biden or you disagree with President Trump, should you be prosecuted where there is no sufficient evidence deemed by an experienced prosecutor, but then someone coming in to go after you because of certain allegations?
She muddied the waters, though, by campaigning on,
no,
I am going to investigate the president if
absolutely
I'm
not.
elected.
What she was going after was unlawful conduct. He has been found by peers, in a jury, peers, that he has been guilty of certain things. They have made it crystal clear what's corruption, ethics violations, you name it. Here, he is seeking to use his office, the highest power, not even in this country, maybe in the world, to exact political revenge using the resources of us, the people. So if I were to do that against my political enemies, this is suddenly not the rule of law as we know it. This is something very different. This is what you see in countries where fascism exists, not when democratic values are supposed to lead the way, and frankly, when democratic values are supposed to sustain the very Constitution. Everyone should be concerned about this, especially when an experienced prosecutor said there's not enough evidence to proceed. If that prosecutor said something differently, then we'd be having a different conversation, but that's not what happened here.
One other question on the Trump litigation. Obviously, I've covered it closely with Rhode Island's Attorney General, Peter Nona, as well. What exactly is the dynamic like among the Democratic AGs, as you all have been working very unusually closely together, it seems like, on all these different multi-state litigation? Do you clash over who gets to file the most interesting cases in your own jurisdiction? How has that gone?
It's been great, actually. I will say I collaborate, and we all do. Peter would say the same thing. We all collaborate, including with Republican AGs. So right now we have active litigation against TikToks, Instagram, and Meta for what they're doing in terms of these platforms that is harming our kids' mental health. And then, of course, when it comes to holding the administration accountable, sadly, it is only Democratic AGs stepping up for the rule of law and for the Constitution. And let me be clear, when we do this work, it is not just Democrats that benefit. It is every constituent, regardless of whatever letters by their name, an I, an R, or a D. I frankly say, I don't give a damn. For me, it really is about delivering for people. And frankly, folks who are in these positions not delivering for real people, you should find a different job.
So let's talk about state level issues. State Auditor DeZoglio has been visiting locally to talk up her push to audit the legislature. She was in New Bedford. She was recently in Attleboro. Obviously, she's been quite critical. You guys have had a lot of back and forth. I'm not going to get into it all here. But stepping back, I think there is a perception that your office has been slow walking this, despite, as you know, 71% of the voters, including you, I know you've said, who voted for this audit. What do you say to voters who'd prefer to see their AG more adversarial toward the legislature than they feel it feels like right now with the auditor's office?
It's unfortunate, the current state of affairs with the auditor, because we have from the very beginning said that question 1 that passed is lawful. It passed lawfully. I support full transparency, not only in the legislature, but also in municipal government, including in my office. But sadly, question 1, what it doesn't get at is when you audit the legislature, there are some activities of theirs that are constitutional for the auditor to audit. And there are other areas that are not constitutional for her to audit. And she has not been crystal clear on what is it that you want to audit. So if you ask me to go with you to court, the judge is going to ask the same thing. And she has not been explicit to us around the scope of what that audit is, because then we determine if it's constitutional or not. And if we don't have that information, a judge will laugh us out of court. And so the slow walking has been on the part of the auditor. We have consistently for a really long time now not got that information, and that's unfortunate, but our doors are wide open in terms of getting that information and proceeding to make sure the will of the voters is absolutely implemented.
It's been going on for so many months. I mean, is it currently a stalemate? Is there any progress?
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be a stalemate. If anything, it needs to be explicit. What is the scope of your audit? And it can't be that you send me a letter, for example, and say the scope is A, B, and C, which may be constitutional, but then you go out publicly and share with media that the scope may be more expansive, because that's what we're juggling with, what you put in written correspondence and then what you say may not always align, and the court will look at that too.
Steward Healthcare owned 2 local hospitals, are now under new ownership. I know your office has been engaged in a criminal investigation there. I believe criminal, or is it a civil matter? I don't know if I misspoke there. Where does that stand at this point?
It's an ongoing investigation, and like I said to folks, as soon as I can share publicly the status of that, the outcome of that investigation, I will do so publicly. And like I said from the beginning, it was horrific to experience and to watch. I inherited a lot of these issues. Obviously, Steward was in Massachusetts for a long time, and to watch people lose their jobs, for the health care of patients to be jeopardized, hurt a lot. And so we're taking this issue very seriously, and we'll report back to folks sooner than later, hopefully.
Attorney General Campbell, thanks for sitting down with me.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, Ted Nesi joins me in studio to talk about the latest with Rhode Island's housing crisis, and new data is not good. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White alongside politics editor Ted Nesi. And Ted, before we get into new data and the housing crisis, we just aired your interview with Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell, who we should note there's no announced candidate against her at this point. But I was surprised to learn from you, because I saw you trying to report this out as you were leading up to this interview and writing the story, that Bristol County, there really hasn't been, as far as you can tell, any constitutional officers that have lived there.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. I researched it as best I could. I canvassed some professors and political experts I know. The closest we've come is Chris McCarthy from WBSM in New Bedford. Shout out to Chris. Said to me, well, there was Governor Morton, but I think that was in the 1800s, who Morton Hospital is named after. Yeah, so it's really unusual to have this region have someone at that top table in Massachusetts. Just sort of interesting.
Well, maybe the South Coast Rail will change that.
Yes.
Well, since we've talked about that a lot on the show. All right, let's pivot to Rhode Island and the housing crisis that continues here. And there's some new numbers from the closely watched fact book from Housing Works RI. And the headline here is Rhode Island's housing crisis has gotten worse. And here they are. For the first time, there is not a single Rhode Island city or town with a typical renter can affordably find a place to live. And there is still no Rhode Island city or town where the typical household can affordably buy a single family home. Westerly and Pawtucket are the communities that are lowest for renters. I guess that's, relatively speaking at the end of the day. I suppose, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but there's one good sign. There has been a 15% increase in building permits, so there are new units on the horizon. Both candidates for Rhode Island governor weighed in about this issue after the fact book came out. Governor McKee held a news conference this week where he announced plans to start spending the $120 million housing bond, and his primary rival, Helena Folks, responded to that on an interview with Kim Kalunian on 12 News at 4. Let's take a listen.
Since I've been governor, working with the Speaker, we've put an emphasis on housing production, and from the income stratospheres, as well as all the way through the fair market values, which, again, that a proper mix is what creates strong communities, strong economies, and this is happening all around the state right now. We're going to ribbon cuttings, we're going to groundbreaking.
We need a much more nimble government. You know, it's great that we passed a $120 million housing bond last year. We voted on this last November. And the governor just this week is announcing what we're doing with it. Like, why are we taking so long? So I think if this were your own family member and your family member was looking for a house, you wouldn't be waiting a year to figure out what to do. You'd be moving fast. You'd be taking all these empty buildings and figuring out how you can convert them faster. I mean, you look at, you know, you drive the bus from downtown Providence out to Central Falls, you're going along Pawtucket, you see all these empty buildings that could be converted.
You know, Ted, you can understand both sides of the argument on that one that they're making there. And if, you know, nothing else, it's obvious that both candidates are signaling this is a massive issue going into election season.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for Governor McKee, and he referenced Speaker Shekarchi, who, of course, is thinking about joining this race with the two of them. And this has been his big issue. So that's another piece of the puzzle. They have done quite a bit on housing. You know, they've put a ton of money into it. They've put, Shekarchi in particular, has put a lot of political capital into this issue, pushing through bills. You know, people forget there's been some resistance to some of his bills, especially
at the local level.
At the local level in the Senate. But then to Helena Folks' point, for the average voter and the average person, they're not excited to get a press release that more money has been put out, another bill is passed. They're looking for, when will I see affordability get better? When will I see rent come down or stabilize? When will I see home prices come down and more supply on the market? So there's a tension there, and I think you also hear from folks there. I think one of the things we're going to hear from her a lot, based on what she said so far, is this idea that even when Rhode Island's current government is trying to do something she agrees with, it's not doing it fast enough. It's not nimble was the word she used. You know, the bridge, again, yes, a new bridge is coming, but it's going to take 5 years. Why does everything take so long? Why is it so slow? I think you're going to hear a lot of that over the next year.
You know, one of the stunning things from Fact Book was that I saw was housing prices have nearly doubled in the last 5 years.
Yeah, it is wild. I have the stats here. So in 2019, the median home price in Rhode Island was about $288,000. That was 2019, the year before COVID. The median home cost in 2024, $475,000. And that's 5 years. And there's a lot that's gone into that. You know, people can work from home now. Mortgage rates have changed, et cetera, et cetera. But you know, it continues to me to be mostly a story about supply and demand. I mean, the upside, a lot of people want to live here. You know, it's not Detroit where they're bulldozing neighborhoods.
You know, but I remember in 2011 walking around Providence with then Mayor Angel Taveras. He was pointing out to me all the empty, vacant homes that they're probably going to have to tear down. And here we are 14 years later, and it's, you know, it's the stark opposite.
Well, it's also about capital, right? So there is demand for more housing. Is there demand for more housing at a price point that matches how much it costs to borrow to build that housing, to pay labor for that housing, to get materials to build that housing? That's part of why you see things like the housing bond, where state officials are trying to close that gap. It's a challenging puzzle in this expensive region.
All right, we got to go. This week on Behind the Story, Jim Hummel joins Eli Sherman talking about the Washington Bridge. Don't miss that. Thank you for watching. If you missed any of it, it's on WPRI.com. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.